my presentation will be in English, so you can take off the headphones. What will it be about? What will I do today? I will first briefly explain what value form Marxism, as you can read it in the booklet, is, because I guess it's not obvious for all here, especially for the ones who are not from the German-speaking world. I will then shortly critique value form Marxism for its androcentric character and say there's a lot of problems with it, although you will see I sympathize with this line of thought in general. In a third point, I will argue why it is still relevant for feminist issues, and ultimately I will shortly present the theorem of value dissociation as a possible mediatory framework that can help us to overcome the problems of value form Marxism. So what is value form Marxism? It is a rather broad term for various schools and approaches. In Germany, you would probably name the so-called Neue Marx-Lektüre, New Marx reading, also the school of Wertkritik, but also in the English-speaking words there are some approaches, some tendencies that are very close to value form Marxism, the so-called open Marxism, for example, John Holloway might be a familiar name, and increasingly also the communization theory, which became very important in the events post-Occupy in the US, and yeah, now I think this theory is becoming more and more a relevant actor also in practical struggles. The origins of value form Marxism are strictly German, I would say, or mostly German, and they lie with the Frankfurt School. Frankfurt School might be more familiar. What is Frankfurt School Marxism? I think it is a Marxism that is theoretically rigid. It has a strong focus on theory, also on a kind of academic Marxism for the good and for the bad. But it is also a self-reflective Marxism, especially against the backdrop of the dogmatic Marxisms that were present in the time when it developed in the 1930s and also in the 1950s and 60s. So it is self-reflective in that way. And the third point, I think, is also kind of going into this direction. It has a negative dialectical approach as opposed to what was common then, the so-called diamat, histomat, the canonical schools of Marxism, Leninism in Stalinist Russia. And it has a neo-Marxist reading of the classics, which focus on, for once, the humanist Marx, the early Marx, but very much also the late writings of Marx, the economic writings, and not so much Engels, but I will come to that maybe later. One important thing for the Frankfurt School and how it became relevant for value form Marxism is its perspective on modern totality rather than on class struggle. Other than the prevalent workers' movement Marxism, it didn't say, well, the motor of history is class struggle. There's always been class struggle, and change comes only through class struggle. It has a different perspective, more general perspective on society as a whole. And certainly, this is kind of the linking point. The Frankfurt School became quite relevant for the students' movement in the 1960s. The name Adorno, Horkheimer will be familiar to most of you. And this is the beginning of the value form Marxism as we have it in the actual sense. So West Germany in post-1968, the heritage of the Frankfurt School, and with it scholars that were actually the students of Adorno and Horkheimer, Alfred Schmidt, Hans-Georg Backhaus, Helmut Reichelt, and they brought a new interest in critique of political economy, where the late Marx, into the debates. This is very crucial for value for Marxism. This came at the same time with new discoveries, especially the publication of the Grundrisse, a writing that wasn't available before, but also the availability of works of undogmatic Marxists from the 20s, Yevgeny Pashukanis and Isaac Rubin from Russia, from Soviet Russia. And certainly the very, very important work of Roman Rustolsky, who sort of systematized the project of Marx and made it available for scientific scholarship. So the essential assumptions of value-form Marxism are that the value theory is important for understanding society, and that in order to understand society, we need to bring forward a form analysis. The various economic forms are the most important issue for studying society. These value forms are so important because they establish a sort of indirect objective domination, which is behind the various forms of direct domination. Society is understood as an automatic subject, as Marx wrote it, and with it, the fetishist social relations that Marx also describes are underscored. And with that, we have a focus on the functional and the logical understanding of political economy, and this is kind of the main topic of value-form Marxism, against even more directly class ontology that was prevalent in many earlier forms, or actually all earlier forms of Marxism. So the major themes again are the critique of economy, the critique of ideology, especially anti-Semitism, also with the Frankfurt School became important, but also some ideologies that are prevalent in the workers' movement, were prevalent in the workers' movement. The critique of the state is an important issue, and to some degree, following Alfred Schmidt mostly, the critique of society, nature, and relations. The strengths of value-form Marxism are its open and self-reflexive, anti-dogmatic Marxist theory, and again, the theoretical complexity, which is, I would say, aligned with very radical conclusions. It is still radical in its outcome, and probably sometimes too radical, I have to say, because things that they would say are very hard to accomplish. And it develops an integral framework for understanding totality. In this, the normativity of critique is reduced, so it's not moralist in the immediate sense, and focuses more on an understanding of the system that we want to criticize. So we have to first understand it, and then we can try to combat it. It is thus focused on the systemic universal character of domination, and I think one major strength is that it establishes a new dialectical materialist ontology and epistemology, which is, I think, very important for the discourses that we now have in the 21st century, Marxist discourses. So, what is the problem? Value-form Marxism is definitely undercentric in many ways. Gender, sexism, patriarchy, they don't play any role in this kind of Marxism. I would say I generalize, there are exemptions, but this is the general tendency. There is no theory of patriarchy. Sexist ideologies are at best othered. This is the actual mechanism that's taking place in society. They reproduce it. They say, okay, well, sexism does play a role, but it's not something we want to deal with. We make the strict analysis of the value forms and so on. Gender is not a relevant factor of analysis. And last but not least, the proponents are over-proportionally male. You can see that if you just look into the books, the publications, also notable journals, one that has recently been made available or in the German-speaking world, it's only man in the editorial board, and this is, even for Marxist circles, I think, not very progressive. What are the reasons for this androcentric character? I think the focus on economy critique, as important as it is, because economy is an important issue in capitalism, can turn to be economicist, and the focus on objective forms of domination, on this abstract kind of domination that is in the background, can disqualify concrete experiences of subjugation. Its anti-normativity may collide with standpoint theory, which is prevalent in many feminist approaches, so there can be issues around universalism also, and this universalism by tendency, or at least on the grounds of the society we live in, privileges a male kind of knowledge. Also, the complex theoretical frame fosters a certain male habitus, one could say, an academic male habitus that is very prevalent with these kind of Marxists. And it's no surprise that that results in networks which are also male academic networks. So these are the reasons, but I would say most of these reasons are not something that is genuine to the theory itself. It is more the question of how it is performed and how the focus is put. So I want to argue that value-form Marxism is still relevant for feminism. Why? Why so? For once, I think Marxist feminism needs a firm materialist framework. Against social constructionism, we need strong statements about the materiality of social relations, and I think value-form Marxism can provide this. We also need an explanation why the economic forms matter so much for capitalist patriarchal materiality, and this we shouldn't take for granted, and I think this is a very, very important issue in value-form Marxism. It actually asks why the value form came into place and why it is so important in capitalism. And fetishism, as it was already mentioned, I think provides a powerful critique of the elusive dominating character of this material world. Another issue, the systems debate. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I think it's more of a catchy word in the English-speaking debate. This debate needs new impulses. What is it about? It is about the question, are we living in capitalism or are we living in patriarchy? Very old debates and still not solved. Is capitalism indifferent to patriarchy? Are there two systems, dual system theory, or is it a unified system? And I think the debates around that could profit a lot from the functional arguments and the close reading also of Marx that we find in value-form theory, especially about the question of systematicity. What is a system? What does it mean to speak about system or systems? And ultimately, which system has historical, genetical, and logical priority? I think you shouldn't put it that way, but that's the questions that are at stake. And more recent debates, I think, the question of intersectionality. This touches upon abstraction and totality. Intersectionality is very much centered on a micro level and has a certain fear to abstract from concrete particularities. The difference is put against the so-called grand theories. In a way, you could say difference is itself universalized, and I would say you need a grand theory to critique universality, or the way universality praise the importance that universality has in our current society. So speaking about patriarchy as an aspect of totality can help us to solve these problems of intersectionality, and materialist feminism profits from the abstract assumptions that we have in value-form theory. And ultimately, the negative dialectical approach that value-form theory builds on can help bridging the gaps that are prevalent in the social movements, but also the theoretical movements that we have. I think the divide between Marxism and feminist issues is becoming bigger and bigger, especially if we look beyond the circles that we are in. There's a lot of Marxism, feminism that has nothing to do with Marxism, with materialist questions, and there's a lot of Marxism, also the value form version, that doesn't really care about feminism anymore. But I think that value form Marxism can help with its negative dialectical approach to bridge the gaps and the divide between determinism and relativism, universalism and particularism, and something as like the opposition between the male positive science and its female feminist critique. We can see, and this is crucial, I think, that these oppositions are determined contradictions. They should be explained themselves. And in a way, we might use value form Marxism and androcentrism against itself to explain these contradictions. This can build on something that is already present in these tenets. There are moments of synchronic, diachronic dialectics in these theories. For example, the exchange value against use value, second nature against first value, identity against non-identity, the logical against the historical. Also, as recently Michael Heinrich was mentioned, the ideal average against the concrete change. And if we approach these contradictions as dialectical contradictions, if we approach them directly, we can seek a new mediation. And then we can use this as a meta-theoretical explanation to actually explain the existence of these divides in reality. For that, we need to establish this contradiction, this kind of contradiction, on the most abstract level as a totality category, and generate a theory that can account for the universal and the other. And to end, I want to present the theorem of value dissociation as an approach that might be able to deal with these problems and with these questions in a meaningful way. It was originally conceived by Roswitha Scholz, but these descriptions are my own, so it's not hers. What does the theory of value dissociation say? It says that the universal domain is male, as in a way also as you said in the beginning, the economy is male in a symbolic way. And in this way, a positive picture of totality is male. What is happening is this famous othering, relativism, particularism, difference are attributed to the female. And this is the important divide, dialectic you could call it. And it builds on symbolic generalities which are socially material. So the materiality is also defined by this dissociation, which is one between the real and imaginary forms. And if you take this into account, then you can see that this gendered and gender dialectic is preserved through all levels of abstraction and plays a role for all the contradictions that we actually see on these levels of abstraction. Value dissociation then is the most abstract dialectical category, or dialectical logic, if you so want, and the totality principle. So the necessity of negative dialectics is, it is not about a positive empirical object, it's not about clear determination of forms, but a negative approach to these forms that value form Marxism also highlights. A result of this is that the reproduction of this epistemic universal androcentrism cannot be evaded, as value form Marxism also does it, but its dialectic can be performatively revealed. This is what value dissociation does. And this amounts to an illustration of the negative core of totality and a critique of it at the same time. Just two brief ways of applying this maybe, and what would value dissociation have to say to the systems debate. It would say that there's not two systems, but one merged system. The old patriarchy and direct oppression is transformed to a mediated form, and capitalist production is now dependent on patriarchal reproduction. So we have one combined system, commodity-producing patriarchy, or capitalist patriarchy, patriarchal capitalism. I think this doesn't matter. It's important to say these are equally important, because the driving force of the system is value dissociation. It's not capital alone, it's not the value principle alone, but it is this dialectical logic. And coming to intersectionality, there is not one positive logic. There is one non-positive logic of dissociation that is responsible for all the differences that we have as a problem in the intersectionality approach. And the so-called relation of the universal and the other is crucial for this, and as we find it in value dissociation. The others are negatively related to this logic, but they are not reducible to it. We need this kind of macro abstraction to explain the meso and the micro levels. Otherwise, we're always stuck with the micro level. So there's a multiplicity of particular oppressions, but the causal relation to totality and to the abstract kind of expression and this objective domination is still prevalent. Difference is produced and maintained by value dissociation in the end. So to conclude, materialist feminism should acknowledge the insights of value form Marxism. I think they are very important, they are complex, and they can help the debates that we have in 21st century and can go beyond the ones that Marxism, Marxist-Feminism had in the 20th century. I think that, on the other hand, a feminist critique of value form Marxism is much needed, because it's still two different worlds. For this, the theorem of value dissociation is also helpful. The gendered and the gender contradictions that we are facing in this dialectic need to be mediated both in theory and in praxis. And for this, a dialogue between the different strands is more important. And I think it would also be fruitful for all sides. And speaking as a man here at this conference, I would say it would be it would be very important that also men engage with this kind of thought, engage with materialist feminism in this way, and see that it is not only something that can be, othered, that can be something that others do, even if we acknowledge that it is important, but see it as a crucial part of Marxist materialist theory. We need this. This is actually the same rank, not only because we want it to be, but because it has the same heuristic value. That's it. Thank you.